Hi guys, how are you doing? It's me, Sandi. As you probably would have guessed, this is going to be a late post because I'm in solitary confinement from YouTube and I'm not allowed to post for 1 week. So, I'm doing my same thing as usual. I'm going to continue reading In the Spirit of the Earth by Calvin Martin. So, as we last left off, we were succumbing to fear, page 35, so let's just dive into it. Personally, I like to imagine that the speech and artisanry of modern, example 16th to 20th century hunting peoples is a close approximation of that Mesolithic ancestral model. Since we see both societies harvesting the earth using pretty much the same strategies, devices, and focus, the toolkit of these Mesolithic societies is for instance, strikingly like that of contemporary hunting societies. While it is more diversified and refined than that of its Paleolithic predecessors, projectile points tend to be smaller and more finely chipped and flaked, and there is ever more regional diversity in style, where style suggests enhanced effectiveness. Though it may reflect merely distance in taste, the bow and arrow replace the spear thrower and dart in the Americas, where I am getting most of my evidence, as the principal missile of the chase. Net sinkers and fish hooks and harpoon points become profuse, and mortars and pestles imply a greater reliance on hard seeds, nuts, and grains than before. Jewelry, bone, comb, awls, needles, and the like also begin turning up in relative profusion in the archaeological record. Rummaging through these people's garbage, archaeologists uncover enormous heaps of mussel shells, certifying a consuming interest in these marine and aquatic sources of food, a taste sustained up into modern times. As for land, game, and wildflower species identification of the bones of those cultures killed and butchered has revealed them to be identical in kind, and with little variation abundance with those still popular with European first appeared on the scene several centuries ago. Nor do the comparisons end here. Based on this kind of evidence, it might be more appropriate to assign the ideology of the hunt which I associated above with Paleolithic hunters to Mesolithic hunters instead, especially when one factor in the possibility of massive overkill by paleo hunters. Still, I suspect that animalness in speech and an attitude of confidence in harvesting the earth were characteristic in both Paleolithic and Mesolithic societies. The important point is that with the end of the Pleistocene, roughly 11,000 years ago, and its attendant climatic, warmer, wetter, geological inundation of continental shelves, vegetational and faunal shifts and transformation, man the hunter adapted with a notably mixed and flexible food economy. The hyper-efficient mode of hunting that quite possibly contributed to massive extinctions was now tuned to a transformed environment where diversity of food types seemingly made most sense. I have already noted a corresponding shift in artistry if we can infer from modern hunting societies. Such artifice was numerous and spiritually animated. I would suggest still so as with Paleolithic hunters. So that's the end of that part. So we'll do one more part since it's not that long. So page 2. Just a bit. Somewhere in here, a process of truly earth-shaking proportions occurred. A change whose motivation and circumstances remain frustratingly elusive. The shift from merely gathering wild food to actually engineering it into being. The Neolithic. It happened in a half dozen or so foci around the world, or at least continued in a sustained fashion in these spots, just a few thousand years after the end of the Pleistocene. Not simultaneously, to be sure, plant and animal domestication began around 7000 BC in the Middle East and closer to 5000 BC in Mesoamerica with corn agriculture. To pick two of the most intensively studied episodes of this global phenomenon. Back in the day when it was academic dogma that hunting and gathering was an inherently inept strategy for living, the Neolithic was hailed as virtually inevitable. Mankind's ceaseless effort to wrest a decent living from hostile landscape were finally rewarded with the insights of farming and pastoralism. Homo sapiens, perennial struggling to master the environment, has finally achieved the great breakthrough, the harnessing of plants and animals for humanity's own higher God-ordained purposes. The kind of anthropocentric teleological reasoning might have been compelling when the study of history and anthropology was still in its fancy, say 100 years ago, and one is embarrassed to witness it well into the present century. But let it be said empathetically that it is no longer credible today, nor has it been for decades. The question now is not what it took man, the hunter, so long to make this inevitable leap from a forager economy to a producer economy, but what tempted certain groups to pursue a course of subsistence so different metaphysically from the one they had in hand. The question becomes even more interesting when one considers that the fundamentals of plant and even animal domestication were doubtless familiar to Mesolithic hunters. The dog, for instance, seemed to have been a source of food, dinner dog in various parts of the world well before the concerted shift from hunter-gatherers to producer economy. Often the question becomes, who domesticated whom? Did man enslave certain species, or did they initially recruit him for their own ends? Archaeologists have long contended that the New World turkey, a pest around human refuse dumps, domesticated us, while natural salt licks would have served as a magnet for deer, resulting in a quasi-domestication of these cervids. It would not have taken any great genius to figure out how penning and feeding certain species would ensure their company. The problem lay not so much in dreaming up the concept, The problem was whether one or the community wished to provide provender, cover, and containment for these proximate creatures. Right here we begin to confront the philosophical underpinnings of the Neolithic. Assuming that the basics of plant cultivation, animal care, and animal impounding were understood by Mesolithic societies, what would have moved them to concentrate heavily on this capacity to generate food rather than simply gather and hunt it as at nature's whim? I cannot answer that definitively. No one can. Scholars have built careers on propounding theories and burying others to explain the process. But in the end, it is all, including my own thoughts, conjecture. My interest lies more in ruminating on the new ideology of nature. One might say the new cosmology that was seemingly ushered in with this new approach to food getting. Several points merit special attention, even reiteration before I proceed. First, the principles of domestication were probably known long before they were systematically, and it appears, preferentially employed. Second, the actual technology for rudimentary plant cultivation, firing a tract of land using a digging stick, and animal domestication, impounding, were likewise in place well before the Neolithic. Again, this is deduced from historical and ethnographic reports on modern hunting societies, who oftentimes have been casual and rather indifferent farmers, though it is conceivable that they borrowed cultivating tools from farming societies. What was lacking was a threshold of Neolithic, always a gradual process, not a big bang. It was proximal incentive combined with a new or enabling image of self vis-a-vis nature, the cosmos. It is this new image of self relative to plant and animal person that fascinates me. Herein, I believe, lies the genius of our modern domination of nature, much as the Bible enjoined, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Genesis 1:28. The wholesale and outrageous imitation is conceivably no more than a posteriori rationalization for humanity's new posture towards its surrounding, a matter of pinning it on the deity whose mankind has invented largely for that very purpose. So we're going to stop there. Very interesting stuff. Page 39. So it's trying to open up the brain and tell us, hey, you don't have to think the way the government tells you. You don't have to think the way the school books tell you. So much stuff could have happened in history, as the internet's kind of telling us nowadays, where what we have learned to say about history is not always what had happened. Like, anything could have happened in the past. We're just saying these things because it was taught to us. But anything could have really happened to our ancestors, and just what we're learning from our findings doesn't mean that it's true. Anyhow, have a good rest of your day. Over here it's 9:20 in the morning, and I don't know how much to do. It's Wednesday. Our cafeteria isn't open, so hope you enjoy your day. All right, bye bye.